Hola amigos! I want you to meet my motorcycle, KTM DUKE. Today I'll be sharing my personal experience with this bike and comparing it to the 390 Duke, which I previously owned. We'll explore its mechanical issues, see how well this bike is suited for beginners and maybe even more experienced riders. Decide if 200cc engine is sufficient or is it worth investing in the 390 version. We'll measure its acceleration from 0 to 100 and the top speed. We're going to put it through its paces on our famous Mate Masterclass Maze Moto Track. And ultimately, we'll find out if this bike is enjoyable to ride and whether it's worth owning. Just to clarify, despite owning my third KTM motorcycle, I am not sponsored by KTM in any way. Unfortunately for me, I purchased this bike with my own money, and this review will be absolutely sincere.
Bellissimo, perfetto.
Let's take a closer look at the bike. Unlike the 390 Duke, it has no fancy stuff. No ABS, no ride-by-wire throttle, no colorful display to keep riders distracted, and no LED headlight. I had the 2017 390 Duke when I was in Russia, so I'm quite familiar with it, and will compare both bikes from time to time. If you are undecided between the 200 and 390 Duke, this video may provide valuable insights. One notable difference right off the bat is the design. Unlike a 390, which rocks a modern insect-style appearance, my bike is older design, which stayed the same from 2012 and were pretty cool and unusual back in the day. For my taste, it still holds up pretty well. It may not be everyone's favorite, but personally I appreciate how KTM bikes have their own distinct style. It's as if other brands make their models from clay, like normal people, while KTM designers use pickaxes and bedrock instead. When I saw this bike, this cornering rocket with suspension which proudly says WP, with brakes which are supposed to be by Brembo, a shiny orange KTM logo and all that for only 3 grand, I just couldn't resist. For all the haters which like to point out that these bikes are not true KTMs because they are being made in India, eat this! Mine is made in Argentina! Though just like on Indian bikes, fantastic quality welds, sometimes as big as my knuckles, are still present. More welding spatter means more material and more structural strength. Anyone knows that. But I'm gonna talk reliability later. Now I'm itching to show you how it rides. When it comes to riding, this bike is an absolute gem. I'd confidently say it's the best handling motorcycle in its class. The combination of its lightweight build, short wheelbase and steep rake makes it incredibly maneuverable. You can easily flick it from side to side, easily navigate through tight spots, easily filter between cars and traffic, you name it. Riding this bike is a breeze, easy and very enjoyable. And not only it has wonderful responsive steering, but also it has plenty of ground clearance as well. That translates into exceptional cornering ability. They don't call it a cornering rocket for nothing. This bike handles corners like a dream. But there is a catch. This is the situation in which I find myself quite a lot, to be honest. You see, my previous Duke, the 2017 390cc model, came equipped with a nice set of Metzeler M5 tires, straight from the factory. Those tires were a perfect match for the bike's impressive cornering ability. However, when it comes to 200cc version, Team Orange seemed to think that 200cc riders are pussies incapable of leaning far enough in corners. So what did they do? They decided to slap on some tires that feel like they're made from recycled flip-flops. I can only assume that their intention was to promote burnouts worldwide. It's the only thing these tires are good for. Okay, I'll buy them. The small 200cc engine is surprisingly powerful, considering its size, and packs quite a punch. And since the bike weighs only 132 kilos, it is really dynamic little machine. Just for the fun of it, let's see how quickly it can go from 0 to 100 and what its top speed is. About 9 seconds from 0 to 100. It's definitely not an H2R, but for a daily commuter it's pretty decent. Enough power to keep up with city traffic. Now let's take it to the highway and check out the top speed. With my 80 kg S on top, this is the best it can do. Throttle wide open. That's the max speed. Maybe I could squeeze a couple of more kilometers if I hunch over the tank, but that's about it. Cruising at 100 to 110 km per hour feels better, like a comfortable cruising speed that this bike can handle with ease. By the way, the 390 Duke is faster, but not by a significant margin. Its top speed is around 150 km per hour, and a comfortable cruising speed would be around 120–130 km per hour. Now, let's address a question I receive quite frequently. Is this bike suitable for beginners? Absolutely. In fact, it's one of the best options for beginners. Why do I say that? Well, as I mentioned earlier, this motorcycle is lightweight and agile, which is a huge advantage for new riders. The power output is also quite manageable. With its 200cc engine, it's forgiving of any mistakes that a new rider might make. However, I might mention a slight downside. The entire Duke series, including the 125s, 200s, 250s and 390s, can be a bit jerky at low RPM, especially near idle. Among other things, this means they are relatively easy to stall at slow speeds. But here's the thing, this drawback can actually be beneficial. It encourages new riders to practice techniques like controlling the friction zone and using the throttle rear brake combination, which I explained in one of my tutorial videos some time ago. These techniques are perfect for managing jerky engines, so be sure to check them out. By the way, I also have 2 video courses available, one for beginners and one for advanced riders. They will greatly enhance your riding skills, regardless of the bike you are on, even if it's a bit jerky. So, while the low RPM jerkiness may not be ideal, it's not something you should fear. I just felt it was worth mentioning, but overall, this bike is still an excellent choice for beginners. Another thing which is very beneficial for new riders is that after some preparation, this bike tolerates beating pretty well. It's highly recommended to install frame sliders or crash cage. I had a small engine cage on my previous Duke, and for this one I opted for a larger one. In most cases, the small cage is sufficient. When the bike falls, it lands on the cage and handlebars. That's where clutch and brake lever protection come in handy too. With these safeguards in place, the bike becomes nearly invincible against falls and tip-overs, which are quite common for new riders. The only vulnerable parts left are the rear brake and shifter levers. So, it's fun to ride, eh? Let's test its riding abilities on our super cool state-of-the-art testing facility, KTM Masterclass Maze Moto Track. This place has it all. High-speed straights that'll get your adrenaline pumping, hairpin turns that'll test your skills, sweeping curves that'll make your heart race, mind-boggling rotations that'll leave you dizzy, technical sections that demand precision, U-turns that challenge your maneuverability, and we even have a dedicated parking space to put its grocery run capabilities to the test. Trust me, this track is the ultimate playground for motorcycles. Ladies and gentlemen, we have KTM on the start line, and our fearless test pilot is revving up to give us an incredible performance. And off they go, tackling the challenging hairpins with precision. The short wheelbase and steep rake on this KTM really prove their worth here. Now onto the circles, where the KTM's responsive steering comes into play, allowing for incredibly tight turns. However, it seems the engine is struggling a bit near idle. Moving on to the faster sweepers, the KTM's excellent steering and great lean angle comes to the forefront. It's such a shame though that the tires don't inspire much confidence in the corners. They're about as reliable as the Argentinian peso, I might say. Nevertheless, our pilot finishes the turn and oh my god, what's happening? A small puppy has ventured onto the track right in front of our pilot. Thank goodness for quick reflexes. Despite the tire situation, KTM manages to stop just in time. The crowd is on their feet, bursting in tears of relief. But the test run must go on. Now it's time for the slower technical section. KTM deftly navigates the slalom and enters the snails, effortlessly maneuvering through them. The snails are no match for the bike's agility. And now it's time to park and run for groceries. Our pilot dashes to the local Whole Foods, grabs a box of healthy nutrition and hurries back to the bike. Oh dear, there are no top boxes, panniers or luggage racks to be found. Our pilot has no choice but to place the box on the pillion seat and hope for the best. Now onto the U-turn. The lightweight nature of this bike truly comes in handy here. And as for the groceries, well, they're not along for the ride. And now the final sprint to the finish line. The little engine struggles to accelerate, but with the determination, KTM crosses the line. What a great result indeed! The KTM skillfully maneuvered through the course, avoiding any contact with the cones. And let's not forget the heartwarming rescue of a little puppy. It's been an action-packed and thrilling run, filled with excitement and enjoyment. Unfortunately, the lack of storage options on the bike resulted in a failed attempt to transport the groceries. It seems someone might be going hungry today. Nevertheless, the overall performance was exceptional, leaving us in awe of the bike capabilities and the sheer fun experienced on the track. Alright, is the Duke a flawless, perfect motorcycle? Unfortunately, it's not without its drawbacks. Let me share with you something that I personally don't like about it. Firstly, it's a matter of ergonomics. I am 186 centimeters tall, which is 6'1", I believe, and I find that the seat height is a bit too low for my liking. As you can see, my knees are bent quite a lot, which is manageable for shorter rides, but can become rather uncomfortable during longer journeys. Additionally, given my weight of 80 kilos, I had to adjust the rear suspension preload to its maximum setting to achieve a more suitable suspension sag. However, even with these adjustments, I would say that this bike is better suited for individuals who are shorter and lighter than myself. On the bright side, most people will find it easy to plant their feet firmly on the ground, which can be an advantage for beginners who are still building their confidence. The front suspension, despite being fancy-looking WP fork, falls a bit flat in reality. It's not terrible, but it's more on the mediocre side, not better compared to other bikes in its class. The brakes give a similar impression. They have enough power to stop the bike, but let's be honest, The bike is lightweight and doesn't reach high speeds. They lack that extra level of feedback and performance that would make a difference. Now, my biggest gripe with this model are tires, as I mentioned before. They simply don't match the bike's impressive chassis capabilities. It deserves so much better. Now, let's talk about the chassis geometry itself. It is fantastic. The bike effortlessly flicks from side to side and handles turns with precision. However, the underwhelming brakes and suspension don't complement the exceptional chassis performance. Another thing which can bother some people is vibration. Me personally, it doesn't bother much, as I've grown accustomed to thumpered engines over the years. The 390 Duke tends to vibrate more compared to the 200cc version, mainly due to its larger piston. While the vibration on 200cc model is insignificant, it becomes more noticeable on the 390 version, occasionally causing parts to loosen or rattle. In fact, I once lost the shifter link on my 390 Duke due to the vibration. It's worth mentioning that this was one of the mechanical issues I encountered with my 390. More notable one was an issue with the coolant fan. The 200cc engine already runs hot, but the 390 engine generates even more heat. As a result, the fan on 390 had to work constantly to keep things cool. After about 20,000 kilometers, the fan gave up, and I had to replace it. Fortunately, it was a relatively simple task of disconnecting a connector and removing 4 screws, if my memory serves me right. These two mechanical failures, along with minor damages like dents and bent levers, which were not the bike's fault, were the only issues I encountered with the 390 Duke. This, coupled with an excellent reliability of 690 Duke, which I also used to own, made me realize that the rumors about KTM's terrible reliability were just that – rumors. With that in mind, I purchased the 200 Duke here in Buenos Aires without any hesitation. But to my surprise, on the very first day after completing the paperwork and heading back home, the oil pressure lamp came on. In that moment, I thought that the KTM curse had finally caught up with me. Before diving into major repairs, I decided to rule out a malfunctioning oil sensor, so I ordered a new one. Thankfully, once I replaced it, the problem disappeared. However, those 2 days of waiting for the sensor to arrive were quite nerve-wracking. A failed oil sensor may not be a serious issue, but it was disheartening to encounter it on almost brand new bike with only 400 kilometers on the odometer. While I still believe that KTM's reputation for poor reliability is exaggerated, it certainly keeps me on my toes. Now, is it a good bike? Who is it suitable for, and what changes I'd like to see from KTM? Personally, I believe this is a fantastic bike. It's a blast to ride, affordable, lightweight, and incredibly maneuverable. It's perfect for beginners as it's forgiving and offers a comfortable upright riding position. However, I must mention that taller riders may feel a bit cramped in the knee area. For more advanced riders, I would say it's a good option as a second motorcycle used for fun stuff or training. It's very maneuverable, it corners really well, and this is a bike which don't make you sell your kidney for repairs in case you drop it. Overall, the Duke is a fantastic motorcycle. However, there are a couple of areas where I'd love to see some improvements. First and foremost, it's the issue of heat. I understand that it must run lean for the reason of lower emissions, so they can't reduce heat with richer fuel ratio. But bigger radiator and cooler fan certainly would be a welcomed improvement. Another thing, I really wish if they had some kind of more advanced version, like 390 Duke R or something like that. Exact same bike, but with some higher-end suspension and brakes. Because the frame and steering certainly are very capable and deserve better suspension and brake components. Otherwise, I totally love this motorcycle and I can clearly see why so many people ride them. I want to finish this review on a philosophical note. This kind of bikes, with smaller engine displacement and lower price tag, often are regarded as beginner bikes, like they are just for noobs. And any respectable rider must move on to something more serious, expensive and powerful as soon as possible. In my personal opinion, we might need to give more appreciation to these machines. After all, what makes a motorcycle so unique and appealing, in comparison to the car, is not comfort or even top speed or acceleration. Pretty much any car can be more comfortable to travel in, for obvious reasons. And though bikes are more dynamic in general, there are still plenty of cars that have comparable speed characteristics. What virtually no car has is the same level of mobility and maneuverability that a motorcycle has. And all that for far less money, both in cost of the machine itself and all the other stuff like insurance, fuel, repairs, etc. Small motorcycles like the Duke are perfect in this aspect. They are relatively cheap, easy to maintain, have insane maneuverability and, plain and simple, incredibly fun to ride. In a sense, these small bikes are more true motorcycles than half-ton behemoths, which are usually considered bikes for experienced riders. Of course, I'm only half serious here. Each type of the bike obviously has its niche and purpose. It's just that I have a feeling that smaller bikes often are not appreciated enough, and a lot of people miss tons of fun and riding experience because they find it sort of socially unacceptable to ride a supposedly beginner motorcycle. And on this bright thought, I think it's time to wrap it up. If you like this video, remember to push the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel. And also check out my video courses for beginners and more advanced riders. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye.